we've got a very special guest joining us right now via the telephone, don't we?
We sure do.
Tonight at the VFW Hall on North Quincy Street in Brockton, Pro Wrestling Super Show featuring WWE Hall of Famer and former tag team champion, Mr. USA, Tony Atlas, who joins us on the telephone right now. Tony, good morning and welcome to the program.
What do you mean, former WWE champion?
You were the tag team champion of the 80s with Rocky Johnson, correct? You could probably still take the tag team champions today. I have no doubt about that, Tony.
Let me tell you something.
You tell me.
I'm not only could take the championship, I could take Tom Brady's place.
You could be quarterback for the New England Patriots.
That would be awesome.
Yes. See, what I would do, I would go join the Patriots, but the only problem that I didn't get on the team with the Patriots is because they only want me to play one position. I wanted to be running back. I want to be quarterback. I want to be receiver. I want to be block. I want to be coach. I want to be the assistant coach. And I wanted to do it all simultaneously. They told me I couldn't do that because all the other guys would get jealous.
Well, it's a good thing that you chose an individual sport like wrestling as opposed to a team sport like football in that case, then, Tony.
You got that right.
Tony, prior to getting involved in wrestling, you were involved in competitive bodybuilding, which is where you got your nickname, Mr. USA. Did you ever venture into any other sports outside of individual sports like bodybuilding and wrestling? Did you ever go the team sport route?
Well, I started off my career as a boxer. I used to box for the Police Athletic League, and then I went from my boxing, and I tried team sport. But my problem with team sport, I remember we was getting ready to go to the championship game, and I coached Thomas back, and he said, "Look, guys," he said, "y'all much better team than this team. Then y'all could win. I just know y'all guys could win. Y'all get out there, go home tonight, get yourself a good night's sleep, and come back and win this championship." Well, I was the only one on the team that listened to him. I remember I used to work at the YMCA, and they used to give me a free membership, and my job was all I had to do was keep the weight room clean. See, back in my day, there wasn't many people lifting weights. I mean, a lot of people went to the Y for basketball, swimming, and other stuff, but the weight room was very, very small. You know, it wasn't that big. They had one bench, one squat rack, because I think it was maybe about 5, maybe 10 people max that used to lift weights at that YMCA. So they gave me a free membership. I was a teenager at the time, and I remember leaving the YMCA out there closed at 8 o'clock. I'm on my way home, and I saw a bunch of my buddies hanging out on the corner. You know, back in them days, guys used to hang out on the corner and hum and, sing. And, they was out chasing girls, and they was passing around a bottle of wine and something else that I don't want to mention on the radio. But I remember going home, I said, boy, I hope them guys hurry up and go and get some sleep. So, I went to bed, got there, and we lost the game. So I remember the coach telling the guys, said, if you guys had did like I told you and went home, he said, half of you guys have got a hangover from whatever y'all been out doing. He said, if y'all guys had did what Tony did, he said, we would have won that game. He said, you see the way he could run up and down that court and not get tired. He said, half of you guys were tired halfway through the game. And then several other things that happened. Even when I was a tag team, there was a lot of guys that I didn't like tag teaming with. I was always more happy for some odd reason, in single matches than what I were in a tag match, because you have to depend on other people. And if everybody's not on the same page, people ask me, say, who is the worst football team in the world? And I said, there ain't no bad football team. You don't get $1 million a year for being a bad player. I said, what separate one team from another team is that one team is on the same page, one team got more focus, one team got more desire. But as far as ability, all teams got the same ability in football, basketball, baseball, no matter what the sport. What it depends on, 90% of anything you do is mental, 90%. So if you're not focused, if you're not determined, and if everybody's not on the same page when it comes to team stuff, then 9 times out of 10, that team is not going to be victorious.
So you're the type of guy that appreciates and accepts the personal responsibility for what you do, and you don't like relying on others. You like to be in control of your own destiny at all times. That's why you like single sports more than team sports.
Yes, because for some odd reason, every time that I always depend on other people to do the right thing. And my mom had an old saying. She said, if you want anything done right, you got to just do it yourself. Because, everybody is not on the same page, but once you get a team that is on the same page, then that team is unstoppable. When everybody is on the same page, everybody got the same desire, everybody, take what they do very, very seriously, and everybody put 110% effort into winning the game. That's what separates a Super Bowl champion from a guy from a team that don't make the playoffs. With a team, like I watch it, I'm a Patriot fan. I'm not just saying that because I live up here in New England. I say that because I remember one year when I first started loving the Patriots, when they was down 20 to nothing against the Colts in one game. Halftime came, they stayed down. They went in at halftime, they were 20 to nothing. Third quarter, 20 to nothing. Fourth quarter, Patriots win.
I believe that was a playoff game years ago. That was the game where Willie McGinnis stopped him on the 1 yard line.
Yeah, and I couldn't believe it. I said, how in the world? And then how in the world can a team come back in less than 5 minutes and score 20 and score a 21 point? How can that be? And hold the other team, keep the other team from scoring. What it was, they went back in that back. They all got on the same page. Everybody was. It was playing as one. A team, we have to become one to become successful. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
Once again, we're chatting with Tony Atlas here on WXBR. Wrestling tonight at the VFW Hall, North Quincy Street in Brockton. Tony, you mentioned that you're much more adept to singles matches as opposed to tag team matches. With that being said, perhaps what you're best known for is the tag team you had with Rocky Johnson in the 1980s. You were collectively the first African-American tag team champions in then WWF history. Earlier in the interview, you mentioned that you got your athletic career started as an amateur boxer at the Police Athletic League. I believe Rocky Johnson was also an amateur boxer prior to becoming a professional wrestler.
Yes, he was.
Is that how the pairing between you started?
Well, you see, the thing about me and Rocky, the reason we went straight to the top so quickly is because, like I said, we was on the same page. We both had the same desire. We went to the gym together. We both believe in fitness. If you look at pictures of Rocky Johnson in his heyday, Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas, we look like brothers. We have similar bodies. Rocky, he was into the weights. He was into boxing. He was into running. And he was into, not staying up late at night, but going to bed, getting a good night's sleep, and getting up early in the morning and hitting the gym. So we was on the same page, The only other tag team that I had that was as great as me and Rocky was a gentleman by the name of Tommy Wildfire Rich when I was in Atlanta, Georgia, when they had Georgia Championship Wrestling with right at the beginning of Turner Broadcast. When Ted Turner first started his television, back in the early 70s, Tommy Rich and myself, we was calling ourselves TNT, T for Tony and T for Tommy. But unfortunately for us, that happened in the 70s before wrestling became what it is now. And I'm more glorified for the thing with Rocky, but I had other great tag team championship, like with Kevin Sullivan, for example. We beat Ivan Koloff and Alexis Smirnoff for the NWA World title down back in the day. So, due to the fact that NWA is no longer in existence, a lot of stuff that I did prior to WWE, got kind of pushed to the side. But I had my greatest victory on the outside of the WWE. But TV was not syndicated. I mean, it was no cable during that time. Everything was syndicated. So if you did something and did something in North Carolina, nobody in Massachusetts knew about it. I remember one time, not to get long-winded on you, I was in Houston, Texas, at the Sam Houston Coliseum, And I went out and I watched my match, and then I hung around because, the match after me was Bruno Sammartino. So I said, oh, I got to see this match. I said, I love Bruno, and I used to, I never seen him wrestle before. I seen him in magazines, and read about him, but I never seen him in person. And I remember when they announced his name, and he walked out in Houston Coliseum, and the place was quiet. They didn't know who he was.
And that's because he was a regional superstar in the New York area, right? And Texas was very far from the Northeast.
And if you notice, due to the fact that WWE had took over everything, then nobody talks about anything outside of the WWE. Also, what I noticed, nobody talks about anything that happened before 1985.
Is that because that's when WrestleMania started?
Every conversation I have is during the during the 80s and during the 90s. It was like wrestling just came. There was no wrestling before 1980.
Now, you mentioned a few interesting things, Tony. You mentioned the ways in which wrestling has been consumed over the years. You mentioned that, in the 70s and early 80s, it was regional and only aired on regional TV from market to market throughout the United States. In the 1980s, You mentioned that cable television came into the picture, which gave pro wrestling more of a national spectrum. Now, pro wrestling, a lot of the ways it's being distributed is on the internet. The WWE Network is an online streaming service which actually archives a lot of their old videos from the 1980s and even beyond. And the WWE has purchased the libraries of other wrestling promotions, some of which are now defunct that you mentioned. So now they actually give some credibility to things that happened outside of WWE parameters during the 1980s. How much has the WWE Network and the internet in particular affected you personally as Tony Atlas in helping expose you to a new audience? Because let's face it, a lot of kids who are going to these independent wrestling shows nowadays probably didn't get the chance to see Tony Atlas when you were a full-time active wrestler.
Exactly. And what is so great about that, Vince, Mr. McMahon not only bring back my old matches, he got myself, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Ronnie Piper, Hillbilly Jim. He got a reality show on WWE Network called Legend House, and they took it aired last night. Yesterday was his first day on the air, and I watched the first episode. They let us see the first episode, and what they did in that program, they not only showed me what I am like today, but they also showed clips of me in my heyday when I had the body of Mr. USA and when I could throw drop kicks and press 300-pound men over my head. So like you said, a lot of people have never seen that. And another thing is people are going to get to see Ric Flair and what made Ric Flair Ric Flair. See, I knew Ric Flair back in the early 70s when he was the most phenomenal person you ever want to meet. See, the difference between matches back then and matches today, if you went 15 minutes in the ring back in the 70s, we consider that a short match. All title matches, world championship matches, they all went 1 hour. Every time I got in the ring with Harley Race, every time I got in the ring with Ric Flair when he was world champion, I always went 1 hour. That match never went less than 1 hour for a championship match. Because the promoter felt during that time that if this is the world championship match, it should not end in 5 or 10 minutes. But now we got mass marketing, and they want to try to get as many faces on the, on the television that they can, But what the WWE have done with pro wrestling, they have really kept it alive because I don't think any promoter had that type of vision. And one of the reasons that Vince McMahon became so successful over top of all the other promotion, every promotion that I ever worked for went good as long as a wrestler was not in charge. And Vince Jr., he really wanted to be a wrestler, and his father would never let him be a wrestler. Because once you become a wrestler, you're going to build everything around you and around people that you like. And the thing about Mr. McMahon is He don't have to like you. If the fans like you, if the fans want to see you, he's going to use you. He don't have to like you. But back in the older days, what have really changed, older days was good, but the older days had its clicks, Like if, I've seen a lot of guys lose their career in Florida because the booker was somebody like Dusty Rhodes. So if you start becoming more popular than Dusty Rhodes, then you was out of there. Same thing in Memphis, Tennessee. If you started becoming more popular to the fans than Jerry the King Lawler, you was out of there. So a lot of these territories, they failed because a lot of the people that was in charge of what they call glory happened. But all the people that work in the office of the WWE, with the exception of Pat Patterson and Sergeant Slaughter and a few others, most of them are just office personalities. They're not wrestlers. So they're able to focus totally on your ability in the ring and your ability to get the ratings up and your ability to entertain the people, not so much of making sure you don't rise above them. When I was in Texas, Bruiser Brody, God rest his soul, him and I, we was doing very, very good. And, another gentleman that is no longer with us, the Ultimate Warrior. At that time, he was the Dingo Warrior. And Kerry Von Erich, he was in a motorcycle accident. And he was out. So during that time, they was really pushing me and the Dingo Warrior. They was giving us the green light. So then Brody came to us. He was a book at the time. He said, guys, I have to knock you guys off the ladder a little bit. He said, because Kerry is coming back. Had nothing to do with our ability in the ring. Had nothing to do with our drawing ability. It was the fact that at that time it was the Dingo Warrior, but I'm going to call him the Ultimate Warrior because then if I say Dingo, people ain't going to know who the devil I'm talking about. So at that time, the Ultimate Warrior and myself, we were the two of the most popular guys in world-class wrestling in Dallas. So right away, both of us ended up losing our job. I went to Puerto Rico, and the Ultimate Warrior went to the WWE. And the rest is history for him. Unfortunately for me, in Puerto Rico, there was an incident that happened in the dressing room where Bruiser Brody got stabbed to death, which caused me to leave the Puerto Rico.
Now you were in the dressing room when that happened, or did you see it?
I took him to the hospital. I'm the one that me and Carlos Colon, the one that broke up the fight. I was an eyewitness to the incident. I went to the police station, reported it to the police exactly what happened. I remember one thing what it really, really taught me about things. When the ambulance came, Brody laid on the floor for about 45 minutes because it was right at the beginning of the show, and the ambulance couldn't get through the whole crowd of people. So they took an ask that there was a lady and there was an old elderly gentleman, and he couldn't lift Brody. You got to realize Brody was a big man. He was over 300 pounds, 6'8", 6'7", 6'8". He was a huge man, and they couldn't lift the gurney up so they could get it on the ambulance. So they said, can one of you guys help? Every wrestler in that dressing room, including the American wrestler, turned their back.
Why did they do that?
I walked over there, and I took and said, I put him in. So I reached underneath the girdle, and I go to lift it, and Brody looked up at me. He said, "Brother, don't drop me." I said, "Don't worry about it, brother." I said, "I curl more than you weigh." So he got a little smile on his face, and I put him on the thing. So then the guy said, "If one of you guys want to go to the hospital with him, you're more than welcome." And I looked around, and everybody put their head down and started lacing up their boots. They act like they didn't hear the guy. So I got on the back of the ambulance, and I started thinking, I said, "Tony, you can't speak Spanish." So there was another wrestler there. He was around my age. He's probably my age now. So I grabbed him and yanked him on the ambulance with me. And he begged me, "Brother, please, por favor, please, brother, don't get me involved in this. Don't get me." I said, "All you have to do is just repeat what I say. That's all you got to do." So I get Brody to the hospital, and I told him I got a friend that got a stabbing. Now, one thing about Puerto Rico that a lot of people don't know, a stabbing in Puerto Rico is like a cold in America. They don't take it serious because, they get stabbed. It's a common thing there. You may be in San Juan in a nice area and everything, but once you get outside of San Juan, Puerto Ricans believe in stabbing over there. Maybe not here in America, but over there, stabbing is very, very common. So he didn't take it serious. So I grabbed the doctor, put him on my shoulder. He was hollering for security, and I took him to see Brody.
You picked the doctor up?
I picked him up on my shoulder, and I grabbed him, because I told him he was stabbing. He opened up the door and showed me a bunch of people standing there with stab wounds, but not as severe as Brody. Brody had 2 8-inch cuts on his belly. It cut his liver. His liver was cut in two, and plus his intestine was cut in two. So I grabbed this doctor up, and he's hollering for security in Spanish. I asked the guy with me, I said, what did he say? He said, he's getting security. But as soon as I set him down and he saw Brody, and Brody moved his head, he said, he asked Brody, are you all right? Brody said, I'm just laying here waiting for somebody to help me. And he lifted Brody's hand up, and he saw the injury. He said, we got to get him in surgery right away.
Tony, why do you think it is that the other wrestlers turned their back and didn't pay attention when they needed help?
What a lot of people don't realize, they all think that we're all friends. When I first started, a gentleman by the name of Klondike Bill, he said that, Tony, if you retire from this business and you have one friend, consider yourself lucky. See, wrestlers are not really friends. They are business associates. See, we're all independently employed. Even though we work for the WWE, we still independently employed. Tony Atlas is not a person. Tony Atlas is a company. What wrestling is a bunch of independent. See, the guys on independence, they don't know that because they've never been in the big league. But once you went in the big league, like, for example, if we was all businesses, John Cena would be McDonald's, Undertaker would be Wendy's, Mark Henry would be Burger King.
I've never heard the Undertaker compared to Wendy's before.
You self-employed. We do individual taxes, and we are individual. It's a bunch of small individual companies that that work together to form one big company.
So you guys are independent contractors, is what you're saying.
We are independent contractors, exactly. Yeah, we are independent contractors. So how far your company succeeds depends on how big of a businessman you are. So by helping another company, you'll be hurting your company. So the object of the game, believe it or not, is to hurt the other company. I never played that game. I always had just took care of myself and just man my own business. If somebody can outdo me in the ring, God bless them. If somebody make more money than me, God bless them. There's several ways of reaching once you was in the big leagues. Now, I'm not talking about independent circuit. Independent circuit, guys got regular jobs. They work Monday through Friday, then they wrestle on the weekend. Myself, my first year of wrestling, I wrestled every year for about 20 years, and I only had 10 days off a year, and that was 10 days before Christmas. I worked 7 days a week. When I worked with Vince Senior, when I worked NWA, when I worked World Class, Georgia Championship Wrestling, there was no such thing as a day off. You wrestle every day because you're like a company. So how well you do, it depends on, and once you out of it, once you completely out of the business, there may be maybe about 3 wrestlers that will return your phone call. Now on the independent circuit, it's different because they never had to make a living at it. You see, all I ever did in my life was wrestle. I wrestled for a living. That was our job. We didn't go and wrestle on the weekends and then go and work another job during the week. I asked some guys on the independent circuit sometime. I said, "Look, guys, how long you been wrestling?" "Oh, I've been wrestling for about a year." And I said, "No, you've been wrestling for a month." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "There's 365 days in a year. There's 52 weeks in a year. So if you wrestle every week, once a week, then you only have 52 matches. Whereas somebody with the WWE, by that time, they don't have over 200 matches. Because John Cena don't go and work anywhere else. Undertaker don't work nowhere else. Mark Henry don't work nowhere else. Just that. That's all Mark Henry, that's all John Cena do is wrestle and work out. Wrestle and work out. And that's what Tony Atlas did all the way up until from 1974 all the way up until 1995, Tony Atlas didn't do nothing but wrestle.
We're chatting with Tony Atlas, WWE Hall of Famer, Mr. USA Tony Atlas. He'll be appearing tonight at the VFW Post in Brockton, 283 North Quincy Street in Brockton. 7 o'clock bell time. Tony, you mentioned that you have really no friends in wrestling, and I want to get back to the Legends House, which debuted on the WWE Network last night. That brings you a bunch of guys together, a bunch of legends who you've traveled the road with. What's it like spending time when you're not traveling the road, but you guys are together in a house for a significant period of time? Does that test your wits between everybody?
George the Animal Steel. I said, George, how come we are so nice and so friendly to each other now? He said, easy. We're not competitive no more, and we got no more ego. See, most wrestlers become friends after their career, but during their career, they are business associates. And it took me a long, long time to realize the fact. I never realized it until my wrestling career was over. That's when I realized that I was with business associates. So whatever you say to somebody, it was back at the office before you finish telling it. But the only thing different is when they tell the story, like Sputnik Monroe used to say, any story worth telling is worth embezzling. So in other words, I remember one time I took and lost some money in Los Angeles. I lost my wallet, and I had about $300 or $400 in it. And that's why I'm always wearing that fanny pack, because since I've been wearing that, I never lost anything. But my wallet when I sat down to use the restroom, my wallet would fall out. It was always falling out of my pocket, so I just stopped carrying a wallet. Most guys used to carry the wallet in their front pocket, but I didn't like that because I didn't like that ball sticking out in the front of my pocket like that. But I used to always carry my wallet like everybody else in the back of my pocket, so that's like carrying my fanny pack. But anyway, I lost about $300 when it was in my wallet. S.D. Jones picked me up at the Newark airport. And now I lost it. Now, this the next day. He picked me up at the Newark airport, because me and him, we had to go to Philly together. And he said, "Hey, Tony, I hear you lost $2,000.
When it was only $300, right?
When it was only $300. But saying that Tony Atlas lost $300 is not a big deal. The story is not interesting. So everybody that told the story add a couple of hundred to it. So by the time the story got back to me, it's up to $2,000.
Tony,
that's what the business was. But I tell you this, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And once again, like my mom used to say, you never appreciate your water until your well run dry. I had more appreciation for my career than what I did during the time of my career. When I had my career, I didn't see it the way it were. After it was all over with and all said and done, then I was able to appreciate, not to get into politics, but I go in the gym sometime, like before the last election, I ask people when they're going to vote. They say, "No, I'm not going to vote." And I said, well, keep that up. Pretty soon, they may take away your right to vote. Then you don't have to work. And then you're going to really wish you had went and voted while you had the chance to vote. I've been to Africa, and I've been in a lot of countries, and I know that a lot of people don't have what we have. And a lot of times we moan and groan and complain about things because we had it for so long. We had lost appreciation for the wonderful country and the wonderful life we live. I used to tell my mom stuff, and she said, "You got a roof over your head?" "Yes, ma'am." "You got food in your stomach?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then shut your mouth. You're doing okay."
Exactly. Tony Atlas
because
joining us here.
There's somebody out here that don't have a roof over their head. There's somebody out here that wonder where the next meal is coming from. There's somebody out here that wonder how they're going to pay this bill. There's somebody out there that is wondering how they're going to pay off their car notes. There is somebody out there that my mother said there's always somebody doing worse. So if you're not sick, you're not ill, you got a job, and people complain about their job. we got about a 7% unemployment in this country. So I'm sure that anybody that's on that unemployment land would love to have your job.
Well, that right there,
so
folks.
What we have lost is appreciation for a great life, a great country. Look at the Ultimate Warrior. He just signed a contract with Vince McMahon. Just signed a contract. But unfortunately, over the years, him, like most people, they never go to visit a doctor. So, when they did the autopsy, they found he had high blood pressure, he had high cholesterol. He was built like a Greek god, but he never, really went to see a doctor to check out his heart, to check out it. He never done that because he just went by, he looked in the mirror, he saw all them muscles, so he figured because he got all these muscles, everything else is okay.
Got to take care of yourself.
It's kind of like going to a car lot and you see this beautiful Cadillac, but you never lift the hood to see how the motor is.
And the motor might be crap.
And the motor might be crap, even though the body is great. The body is made up more than just muscles. You got to make sure your liver, your heart, and all that stuff is in good working condition. And there's people all over the world now that never took the time to go and check themselves out. You can check your own blood pressure. They got machines in Rite Aid where you can walk in and stick your finger, put the cuff on it, check to see if you got high blood or not. So you never appreciate good health until you lose good health. And my mother always said, you never miss your water until you're well. So what I did when I retired, I had more appreciation for life. I was with Matt Bourne. Matt Bourne come up to me, sat and talked.
Doink the Clown, right?
Yeah, Doink the Clown. He was the original Doink the Clown. We was in the New England Hall of Fame. We were just with that to do an autograph signing. Me and we sat. Not in 1,000 years that I thought that I'm gonna lose that guy. The same thing with the Big Boss Man. We was in Kingsport, Tennessee. And he told me he was getting ready to start promoting some shows down in Tennessee because people asked him to bring wrestling to where he lived at. So he said, "Can I have your number, Tony?" He said, "I understand you did a little promotion up in Maine called Atlas Championship Wrestling." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I was sending you some information." So I called his wife I called his house to try to get get his address and his zip code and everything so I could mail him the information. And his wife says, "Tony, I hate to tell you, but our boss man is gone."
Must have hurt.
Got the kid. I just talked to him last week. Tony Rumba, the Boston Bad Boy. He was a stone New England Patriot, Red Sox, Bruin fan, and I was leaving to go somewhere, and he said, "Yeah, Tony, I got some nice shows going on." He was on Nessa TV and everything. One of the best any promotion during that period of time. And I said, "Well, this was on a Friday. I was leaving out of town." I said, "I'll give you a call Sunday." He said, "Okay." I called Sunday. He was gone.
You got to tell people that you love them while they're here, right, Tony?
Life is very, very precious.
Life is precious. Folks, that is WWE Hall of Famer, former tag team champion, an advocate for you to vote, an advocate for you to get your yearly physical, and a New England Patriots fan, Tony Atlas. He's going to be at the VFW Post, North Quincy Street in Brockton tonight for the Pro Wrestling Super Show. Tony, I'm going to come up and say hello to you now. We're going to talk some more, my friend.
Okay.
Tony, we look forward to seeing you. Any final words for our listeners before we let you go?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Any final words for our listeners before we let you go here on this Friday morning?
America is the greatest country in the history of the world. The American people are the greatest people in the history of the world. Love life. Treat everybody the way you want to be treated. And come out and watch me wrestle tonight.
Oh, I encourage folks to do that as well. VFW Post, North Quincy Street, Brockton. Tony, thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
You're more than welcome, sir.
You're listening to the Metro South. What's that, Tony?
And happy Easter. And happy Easter to you all.
Happy Easter, Good Friday, everything, Tony.
Yes.
You're listening to the Metro South Morning Show, PM in the AM. Stick with us, folks, here on AM 1460, the new WXBR. We'll be back after this.